Good morning, everybody. I'm Donna Golub. I'm the Executive Director here at A Positive Approach to Teen Health. I'm so glad you're here to join us today. We have over 90 people registered. I know many of those are parents who emailed us concerned about their children and underage drinking. And for those of you who are familiar with our lunch table webinars, you know that you register, you get an email with a recording of this call, of this webinar. So we have several parents who are really interested in what we have to say and hope to be able to perhaps watch this even with their young person. So we're excited about that, and we're excited to see parents who care and get involved. For those of you who are frontline staff, you know that sometimes when we look at youth and we wonder what's going on with our kids, we often want to blame the lack of parenting or the lack of oversight and accountability. And so anytime we get calls from parents questioning our programming or what's happening or looking for help, I am always so thankful, and I congratulate them for being involved and caring parents, because it really does. We know from all the data, we know that having involved parents and trusted adults in your life really does make a difference. So we're super excited for those of you parents who are joining us today. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being engaged. Thank you. And thank you from your child. Sometimes they're going to tell you they hate you and they don't act like they want you involved, but they do. They really, really do. So thank you. Thank you for being involved. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We all have kind of become used to webinars and the Zoom life. Feel free to leave your cameras on or turn them off while our speaker is sharing her presentation. When we go into the lunch tables time this afternoon, I do ask that you re-engage, use your camera if you're able, so that you can actually connect and do some great networking with the group around your table. We also know from the last 2 years of COVID and the increase in webinars that there may be people working from home, and that means that there may be children who need some attention or pets who want to be involved and walk across keyboards or bark at the birds outside. We also know that UPS and Amazon deliveries are pretty regular. So if you need to excuse yourself for any reason, you're adults, do what you need to do. Just please keep yourselves muted so that we don't have to share in all of your excitement that's going on. Again, thank you for joining us today. I would like to introduce you to Lisa Hutchinson. She has 25 years of experience working in and around this field, is involved with her local coalition, as well as being a speaker at several other substance abuse coalitions in the state of Indiana. We are connected with her through our local Porter County Substance Abuse Council, who is co-hosting our call today. Thank you to Dawn and your team over there at Porter County Substance Abuse Council for finding us an amazing speaker and for partnering with us on this call today. That being said, I am going to turn it over to Lisa, allow her to introduce herself a little bit more, tell you more about herself, and she will be sharing our presentation today.
Well, it's afternoon for me, but it's not afternoon for all of you. So thanks for joining me for a couple hours out of your day today. And I hope that this will be as interactive. I have some questions I'll be asking for your input on, and hopefully you will learn something today that you might not have known. I will use Indiana data because that's from my perspective, but I guarantee you that it's probably true in your states and communities as well. I am the director of the Indiana Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking and have been doing that for 25 years. I am also the vice president of prevention and policy at Mental Health America of Indiana. So in that role, I am part of the lobbying team, and we lobby for mental health and against the deregulation of substances like alcohol and other drugs. So that is a little bit about me. I live in Lebanon, Indiana, which is just north of Indianapolis. My husband and I, he's a professor at Purdue. We have a son who's a junior at Purdue, and we have a 17-year-old son here still at home in high school. Thankfully, he is not home yet, so you will not hear him, hopefully. But I'm going to bring my presentation up, and we will get started. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Let's see. Let me know if you can see this, hopefully. You would think by now we would all know the drill. Can you all see that?
We can see it now, but you are a few slides into your presentation, I think.
The first slide should be what's the drug used most by Indiana teens and adults.
That's what we see.
All right, good. So again, I'm asking this question from an Indiana viewpoint, but it could be true in your states as well. So what is the drug used most by teens and adults in your states or communities? And you can either unmute yourselves and answer or put it in the chat box. Vaping, okay, nicotine, marijuana. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you what the most widely used drug by Indiana teens and adults is alcohol. And I think sometimes we forget that alcohol is a drug, and probably if you looked at your alcohol use rates, they might be higher than you think, than the other drugs that you have mentioned, because alcohol, as we know, is a very socially acceptable drug. It's very ingrained into our culture. And I think a lot of times we forget about the fact that it is a drug. First of all, it's a depressant. I think we all know that, but we tend to focus on the other drugs that get the most attention. I do want to touch just a little bit on opioids today, even though the focus of this presentation will mostly be underage drinking. But we do know, at least in Indiana, I don't know about your states if you're not from Indiana, but we did have an opioid crisis actually several years ago that was very devastating to a particular community and county in our state. And luckily, we were able to put a lot of resources towards that and seem to have been able to get that crisis under control now. But we do know that opioids are on the rise with our young people, particularly the last 2 years. Mental health challenges have soared among our teenagers and our college age students especially. So unfortunately, there is opioid use, and I'm not going to read the definitions to you, but basically they're drugs that relieve our pain and help us feel better. And you can see how these drugs travel through our blood and get into our brain cells. This is very much like what happens with alcohol and underage drinking and even adult alcohol use as well. It really impacts our receptors much in the same way as opioids do. Here are probably the most common that you're familiar with: heroin, fentanyl, oxycodone, and hydrocodone. Whenever there is a robbery at a drugstore, these are the oxycodone and the hydrocodone are typically what they're looking for. You've heard about, drugs being laced with fentanyl and people don't know what they're consuming and they die from consuming fentanyl. This is true with not only other illicit drugs, but even marijuana and some other substances. So these are probably the four most common types of opioids that we're all familiar with. And our children are using these. Not so much the heroin, although there is some of that, but definitely the oxycodone and the hydrocodone. So again, my focus will be on Indiana teens, your numbers could be different, but you can see, thankfully, that opioid use is a low percentage when you compare it to what's happening with alcohol, for instance, which we'll look at those numbers in a minute. But still, 2-3%, that's still too many. So, you know, how do they get them? What impact does it have on them? We'll talk about that as well. So I have another question for you. Our brains are not fully developed until the age of what? Someone says 25, 26, 28. Yep. Well, you're all pretty much right. Our brains are not fully developed now, they say, until 27. It used to be 25. They've done additional research about neuroscience, and now they're saying 27. So really, I'd say anywhere between 25, 27, 28. We still are developing our brains, our synapses, our cells are still absorbing information. And so that's why it's really impossible for young people really sometimes to make wise decisions about substances, because they literally cannot do it. Their brains are not fully functioning enough to allow us to do it. And I don't know if you know people, but I think for some people I know, their brains aren't fully developed at 27 either. It takes a lot longer for some people. But we know that any substance we put in our brain before it is fully developed can be detrimental. And I have a brief video to show here, hopefully, if it will show up, that is an easy way to understand how these substances impact your child's developing brain or the students that you work with.
As teens, people are always telling us what we can't do. Do you ever wonder why that is? Why can't I stay up late? What could happen if I just play for 15 more minutes? Who cares if I smoke a joint every now and then? Let's face it, adults may mean well, but they can't really explain why they won't let us do this stuff. The thing is, there's actually a really cool explanation, and it has to do with our brains. From the outside, the brain of a newborn looks just like a smaller version of an adult brain, but there's a big difference. There's a ton of stuff that still needs to be programmed into a young person's brain. That's where our life experiences come in. How we interact with what's around us shapes our brains until we're in our mid-20s. We can't feel our brains changing, but they are super busy building circuits and programming. So how does this happen? Every little thing that happens to us can change our brain in huge ways. At short distances, our experiences can make or break connections between brain cells. By guiding the creation of circuits, experiences shape our perceptions, memories, and everything that makes us unique. But they also affect our brain across longer distances. This involves the construction of thick bundles of fibers that connect different brain regions. By creating this complex network, experiences help increase the brain's bandwidth, allowing it to work better and better. You've got to keep in mind, these short and long-range connections are influenced by everything we do and everything that happens to us. But this is awesome news. It means we are the programmers of our brains. Every decision, good or bad, influences how our brain develops. Let's talk about taking drugs. For example, pretend this is the keyboard you are using to program your brain. Using drugs just for fun or to get high would be like scrambling the letters on the keyboard. Now, if you scramble the letters on the keyboard after the program is written, that can lead to temporary errors or make it hard for the program to run for a while. But if you scramble the letters while the program is being written, the program can incorporate catastrophic, long-lasting glitches. This is why teens are better off without drugs. We are in the middle of coding our brains, and drugs can cause real problems that can last a long time. And yet, drugs are just one of the many possible ways of scrambling our keyboards. For example, not enough sleep, lack of exercise, or eating too much junk food can also harm our brain programs. So yeah, I get it. It's annoying to be told what we can and can't do, but I would rather focus on my ability to shape my brain through smarter decisions. It turns out we have far more control than we thought. We can use this information to choose our own paths and give ourselves the best possible futures.
So I think that's a good explanation, even as an adult, that helps put it in perspective. And, you know, in Indiana, when we gather this opioid data, we do a school survey every other year. I don't know if your states do a school survey, but teens who use opioids say they most often get it from their homes. And that could be, you know, parents or grandparents' medications that are left over, left out, maybe all of them aren't used. And so, you know, who's ever prescribed to them doesn't really pay attention to that. And they're also available from other friends, and unfortunately they can buy them online as well. So it's the same way with alcohol. You know, teens are telling us they use these drugs to manage their emotion and stress, and opioids give them a high that lasts a lot longer than alcohol. But that's why we have to be so cognizant of the medications we have out at our homes, and take advantage of those drug disposal days that our communities have, because it's important to get rid of that. And this, I will send this out as a PowerPoint, but this is an NIH video. So if you just Google NIH, National Institutes of Health, Teen Brain Development, this video should come up. Whoops. So in your communities, we're going to switch our focus now to the underage drinking aspect. But in your communities, what are the reasons you hear the most that young people drink or do other drugs? To have fun, to be social, because there are parties. Emily says to manage mental health problems. Yep, they like the way it makes them feel, peer pressure, stress and anxiety. Yep, these are all reasons that I've heard in pretty much every community. And I think the mental health aspect is something that we've noticed trending, at least with our college students that we survey over the last few years. More and more they're drinking to manage their stress and their mental health issues when that wasn't the case before. Any other thoughts on that? Self-medicate. Yep. Oftentimes, Jill says self-medicate. Oftentimes, you know, young people and adults have undiagnosed mental health disorders, and they just know they feel bad. So they're going to do whatever they can to not feel bad. And they turn to substances to do that. That's correct. Well, the good news is that, at least in Indiana, monthly alcohol rates have fallen every year since we began this school survey. And this is a survey of 6th to 12th graders. And it asks about their substance use and now their mental health. So that's good news. So we know that some of what we're doing in prevention is working. Unfortunately, we also know that binge drinking rates have risen. On the college level, it used to be that males drink more than females. That's no longer the case. They drink at very similar rates now. It also used to be on a college campus that underage students drank beer. Well, unfortunately now the beverage of choice is liquor. So I think the products have changed. The situations for drinking has changed. And the reasons why our young people are drinking and using other drugs has changed. So I think if we want to start moving the needle on our numbers and having more progress in preventing some of these behaviors, we really need to look at why young people are drinking and using other drugs, and how we can assess those problems and try to work at it from the other end before they start self-medicating or drinking to manage their stress. And here in Indiana, we also have something called Hope Academy. It's a high school for students who are in active addiction and recovery. I don't know if any of your communities or states have similar high schools, but you know, if you think about it, those are 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are in active addiction and recovery already. So by the time they get to a college campus, they've already been drinking for several years. Now on college campuses, there is a movement to support those students in recovery. So you'll have a lot of substance-free housing and a lot of recovery supports on campus that really didn't exist 10 years ago. So that just kind of shows you the direction we're heading in and how that's probably not a good thing. So again, I'm going to look at Indiana data because that's where I am, and specifically Porter County, where it is up north. And basically these risk factors would be the same for your community as well. Anytime you have a large percentage of households that are below the poverty level, and it's not that they're at risk because they're headed by single females, it's that they have children under 18 and are below the poverty level. You can also see, unfortunately, that in Porter County, almost 70% of child removals are due to parental substance use. And I don't know if any of you want to share if you think this is similar in your community, but definitely in all the communities that I've done these presentations for and have looked at their county data, I would say I've never found child removal rates below 60%. So I don't know if that's true for any of you, if you want to share that, but it's fairly staggering. You have generational substance use disorder from parents, grandparents, even great grandparents, and it's never been addressed. So it's, it impacts children. Someone mentioned something in the chat. Emily says, my husband and I are foster parents and all of our placements have involved alcohol and other substances. Wow. Yes, unfortunately, I'm not surprised, but that is terrible. You also have residents who are uninsured, meaning that they can't access behavioral health care, they can't access mental health care because they don't have insurance. Oftentimes they don't seek out treatment, even if they think they have a substance use disorder or a mental health disorder, because they don't know how they're going to pay for it. And I think that's probably a larger number than we imagine. In our college survey, we started asking about mentally unhealthy days, and that is when someone just feels like, they're sad, and it's not just situational sadness, it's lingering sadness, it's lingering depression, anxiety. So you see that the average number of days that people reported as feeling mentally unhealthy was 4. So that's 4 days out of the month where people just can't handle what's going on around them. And then you will see that 14% of deaths were by suicide. Unfortunately, we know that suicide rates are rising, especially among our young people. It's impacted by COVID, by 2 years of not being around their peer groups. We didn't think about students being home that might be living with abusive family members or parents who have substance use disorders. And the fact that, those students were home with those parents instead of being at school where they have trusted adults. You had students who the only meal they were getting, hot meal, was at lunch. And, though a lot of schools worked hard to provide those meals to students, there were a lot of students who probably went without food because they weren't in school. So COVID and all the things that go with COVID definitely impacted those suicide rates. Anyone have anything you want to share about, have you noticed an increase of suicide rates or suicide ideation with any of the students you work with? Okay. So also you'll see part of the community risk in this particular county is that, nearly a quarter of adults reported excessive drinking. Again, that's how alcohol is ingrained in our community. If you think about it, think about your own community, what are what are the alcohol influences in your community? And as a society, if we have a bad day, oh, I really need a cocktail. If we want to celebrate, oh, let's pop the champagne. If it's someone's birthday, if it's a wedding. And I'm not saying that alcohol is necessarily bad and doesn't have a place in celebrations and things like that. But I think as a culture, we need to look at what place do we give alcohol? And is that our go-to when we as adults are having difficulties and, at work or at home or with our kids or whatever, what place are we giving alcohol? You can also see that they had a high percentage of driving deaths that involved alcohol. And then part of the work I do is to look at environmental influences that might promote underage drinking and unhealthy use of, I'm not sure why it keeps doing that, unhealthy use of other substances. And Carolyn just says we visited 135 tobacco outlets as of April 15th. Okay. That's good. Because I know during the pandemic, compliance checks were not being done because obviously it was a pandemic. There are also, almost 300 alcohol outlets. Yes, this is for Porter County. And then what I found interesting is the number of opioid dispensations. You can see that it works out to about 168 per 1,000 people. This rate is higher than the state average. The state average is less than that, but that is, if you think about it, that's a lot of opioid dispensations. So I think doctors have probably learned a lot from the opioid crisis, and, hopefully we are seeking other ways to help people manage their pain other than just automatically prescribing an opioid. So of course, there are always consequences to substance use, and how those show up might be different in your community. But in Porter County, 42% of all persons admitted to treatment reported alcohol use. And then you can see that a smaller number, but still significant, reported methamphetamine use, and then a higher number reported opioid use. So it's definitely still an issue, and it could still be prescribed to you, but you could be taking it as not prescribed, and that is still an issue with use. And there were 33 deaths, and then 255 students were suspended or expelled from the school systems for using alcohol or other drugs. Can anyone tell me the definition of excessive drinking? Or binge drinking? No, and Marion asked a question that didn't refer to the number of pharmacies. That was prescriptions or dispensation of pills, I guess, the pills that were actually handed out. Okay, more than 5 drinks in 4 hours, 6 drinks in 1 sitting. You're getting close. So excessive drinking is binge drinking, which is 5 or more drinks for a male in a 2-hour sitting and 4 or more drinks for a female in a 2-hour sitting. So it could be a binge drinking, or also heavy drinking, which is defined as 15 or more drinks per week for a man, or 8 or more drinks for a woman. So, that's a lot of alcohol, no matter which definition you go with. And then I just want to point out some interesting statistics here on this slide. We know that the age of first use of alcohol and other substances is trending downward, unfortunately. It used to be around 14 or 15. Now it's between 12 and 13 that young people are starting to use their first substance. I want to point out the last bullet on the left side, that boys drink at higher rates than girls, except for the 8th grade. And again, this is Indiana data, but it might be true in your state as well. If you were to think of some reasons as to why 8th grade girls would be drinking at higher rates than boys, just in that grade, what do you think is attributable to that? Anybody have any thoughts? They're starting to socialize more with high school kids. Yep, trying to fit in. Exactly. Maturity level, pressure to conform or impress before going to high school. Definitely. We also know that girls tend to be, not in all situations, but in many, more attuned to their feelings and emotions. And especially around 8th grade, when those hormones are probably raging and they're worried about that transition from middle school to high school, they're probably more attuned to those emotions and feelings, and maybe drinking or using other substances to try to deal with that. I don't know about you, but I am really glad that when I was in school, in high school, especially in the 80s, there was no social media. I think we had enough pressures as teenagers back then, but to have to deal with the pressures of social media, I think our young people are faced with a lot more to handle than we were, at least that I was when I was in high school. You know, I have a whole presentation about how social media influences underage drinking and how it influences mental health. And though some social media can be used for good causes, we use it, you know, to share our prevention messages. I think a lot of it is detrimental to our young people and their social and emotional well-being. So girls, you know, are probably thinking about that big transition to high school and may not feel like they're prepared to handle it. And then you can see in high school, just how things rise. You know, 5% of 9th graders report binge drinking, 14% drink on a monthly basis, but by the time, you know, they're in 12th grade, that has risen significantly. So just something to keep an eye on. And you might look at the, if you collect data of this kind in your state, you might look at that 8th grade boys versus girls data and see if that's true for your community as well. And then look at your high school data and see if those numbers do increase like they do here in Indiana. Any questions or comments so far? So just like in your state, it's illegal, at least I assume it's illegal in your state also, if you're not from Indiana, to provide alcohol to minors. We also worked on a social host law a few years ago that makes it illegal to provide a place for minors to drink. So that means, you know, parents who host parties at their house, allow kids to have sleepovers, pool parties, and allow them to have alcohol. In Indiana, that is illegal as well as providing alcohol. As a retailer, you cannot sell alcohol to a minor. We do not have a mandatory carding law anymore unless you appear to be under 40, but you cannot sell alcohol to a minor. Lisa says that is true also in Kentucky. And in Indiana, at least, we have zero tolerance for underage possession. So you cannot have any alcohol in your bloodstream or on your person. Anyone have anything different than that in your state? Okay. And I mentioned, you know, how it was when I was in high school in the 80s. Really, there was, you know, beer, there was maybe wine, and liquor was really hard to get a hold of unless you tried really hard. Not all alcohol is equal. And we're going to talk a little bit about the products. So in your community, what do you hear or see as you work with teenagers or deal with the aftermath of parties or whatever, if you're a first responder? What are young people in your community drinking? Vodka, beer and wine coolers, hard seltzers. Yes, the seltzers are huge now. Hard liquor, whatever they can get at home. That's a good point, Lisa. Yep. Yeah, I'm going to show you some of these products. So you mentioned beer. Well, this is beer on steroids. The first thing I want to point out to you is the names of these: Hurricane Punch, Watermelon Smash, Blue Frostbite. I don't think for most of us, these products are meant for us as adults. And then I want you to notice what is in the left-hand corner. What percent of alcohol by volume is listed? 12%. Does anyone know how much a typical can of beer, how much alcohol content is in a typical can of beer? 4 to 6, 6. Yep. Yeah. It's yeah, it can be anywhere from 4 to 6%. So this is double. So really, when you're looking at one can of Blue Frostbite, which is only 8 ounces, you're really getting 2 alcoholic beverages in one can, because and you can even see, if you can read it, it says warning, 12% alcohol by volume. So these are not beers. These are double the alcoholic strength of a regular beer. But, you know, if you haven't ever seen these products before, you might not even realize that that's a case, even though it says warning contains alcohol. Still might not know. Have you ever seen these in your local big box store or grocery store? These were sold right at the checkout counter of my local big box store. And, you know, no one was really monitoring them. They were just there. As you can see, they're brightly colored. They're called Buzz Balls. Have a ball. These are pre-mixed alcoholic beverages. So this one's a tequila Rita. You can see that it has 10% of alcohol, 10% alcohol in it. Some of them are higher, but these are sold very easy to pocket by someone who wants to take it out of the store. There aren't, you know, in a lot of grocery stores that sell liquor, they have end caps on their caps on their bottle heads, and they, you know, sound if someone tries to take them out without paying for it. Sometimes they'll have the barcodes on that will also do the same things. These have nothing. These are really the size of a tennis ball and easy to put in your pocket, and are usually right up front at the checkout counter. Someone mentioned vodka. There are so many flavors of vodka now. Virtually every flavor you can think of. These are very popular among college students, especially because they like to mix them with things to create other flavors. So yeah, vodka and any other kind of liquor actually is really important to them. And then we talked about the hard, someone mentioned the hard seltzer. Well, now there are all kinds of hard sodas, hard seltzers. These are just a couple, Henry's. And if you are a parent and you didn't know these had alcohol in them and you weren't paying close attention to the label, these would look like regular sparkling waters. You know, Henry's hard sparkling water, you might gloss right over the hard word because it's in cursive and it's kind of hard to read. These look exactly like their counterparts that have no alcohol. So you really have to be cognizant of what your child is drinking if you aren't familiar with these products. And you can see these have 5% alcohol, but no sugar, which is good, I guess, important to some people. But these are very popular. White Claw is a hugely popular sparkling seltzer on college campuses and among adults, actually. So I always want to remind people about the standard alcohol drink chart. Like I pointed out with those Natty Light products that we looked at earlier, that's even smaller than a regular beer, which most beers are 10 to 12 ounces. That one was 8, so it's even more concentrated with alcohol. You can see that, you know, a standard beer, standard glass of wine, and standard shot of liquor all have the same amount of alcohol. The problem is when our young people are drinking at a party where someone has made a punch and everyone is just dipping their red Solo cup in it, you don't know what's in there. They don't know how much alcohol they're getting. They don't know how many bottles have been poured into that punch. No one is measuring the alcohol content. So that's when things like alcohol poisoning happen, because teenagers don't know what they're drinking. They think they're just having a, you know, just a fun glass of spiked punch, when really it could contain, you know, several shots of liquor. So I mentioned alcohol poisoning. Unfortunately, we know that, you know, we have young people who die from alcohol poisoning every year. There is a family here in Indiana, the Finblooms. They lost their son. He wasn't even in college yet. It was a pre-college party. He was going into college, and he died from alcohol poisoning. So they worked hard in our state to pass a lifeline law so that young people can call and get help for themselves or a friend who's had too much to drink without fearing any, you know, consequences like being arrested that day. So that was an important thing that they did to help make sure that no other family had to go through what they went through. But you probably all have heard about alcohol poisoning. It's funny when I talk to young people about this, especially in like the middle school age range, they don't know that you can be poisoned from alcohol because, again, everyone sees it as a beverage. But we know that it's consuming a toxic amount of alcohol. And for you, that might be different than it is for me. If you're a big man, that could be different than, you know, someone like me who's 5'2", and you know, maybe I have more fat than you do. It depends on a lot of things, but toxic is just a lot of alcohol in a shorter period of time. And I also remind people that when you stop drinking, your BAC continues to rise. So you might, you know, stop drinking at the bar and 15 minutes later get in your car, but your BAC is going to continue to rise. It takes an hour for our body to process an ounce of alcohol. So I think people oftentimes forget that BACs continue to rise. So if you, you know, if someone at a party has been drinking too much and they pass out, you know, and someone puts them to bed, which we always warn against not doing, their BAC is continuing to rise, and that's when alcohol poisoning happens. And you can see some of the symptoms here. You know, we always educate our high school and college students about this so that they are not afraid to make the call to help someone if they need to. Any questions or comments about anything so far? Okay. So where are young people getting it? And this tends to be true across most communities. Younger adolescents and teens who are not mobile yet, can't drive, typically get it from their parents or other adults. And this could be a parent who unfortunately sees nothing wrong with giving it to them. It might be that they take it from their parents' unlocked liquor cabinet or that refrigerator in the garage that is never monitored. So they don't know that, you know, their child is taking alcohol out of there. But that's how younger adolescents and teenagers get it from parents or other adults. When they get a little bit older and start being able to drive, they get it from parties or older friends or family members, maybe an older sibling who is old enough to buy it or not. Or they will often ask someone going into a store, hey, can I give you an extra couple bucks if you go buy me this? And that unfortunately still happens. College students get it mostly from parties, or they're able to buy it. And unfortunately, most aren't even asked for an ID. So no one's even checking to make sure that they're of age before they sell it to them. I don't know how many times you might have heard this, but I hear often from parents that, well, I'm going to let my child drink at home because then I can control it and make sure that they're safe. Has anyone ever heard that before in your work with prevention? Yep. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that is definitely not what happens. And I often ask parents, half tongue in cheek, but would you allow your child to break any other law as long as they were doing it in your presence? Or would you allow them to engage in any other risky behavior as long as they're doing it in your presence? For instance, and they really hate this question, would you give your child a condom and let them have sex in your presence so you can make sure they're doing it right and that they're safe and responsible? No, of course not. That's no. Would you allow your child to consume, cocaine or heroin to make sure that they're doing it right and they're being safe and responsible? No. Well, then why do we allow it with alcohol? And Lisa says it gives the message that it's okay to break the law. That's exactly right. It's okay to break this law because I am going to make sure you're doing it safely. But, we don't want them to break the speed limit. We don't want them to skip school, but we're going to allow them to drink at home. And unfortunately, research shows that young people who are allowed to drink at home under their parents' supervision are more likely to engage in other high-risk behaviors like drinking and driving, drinking elsewhere, engaging in binge drinking. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't even volunteer at post-prom this year because the last shift ended at 3:30. I can't stay up till 3:30 and monitor what my son and his friends are doing. So these parents who say, I'm going to monitor them all night, they'll be safe, I doubt it. You have to sleep sometime. So unfortunately, we know that more than 35 young people die every year due to alcohol, and that could be from alcohol poisoning, from accidents that happen while they're drinking. We had, unfortunately, a young woman a couple years ago at one of our universities who had so much to drink, she fell down the stairs, hit her head badly, and died from those injuries. Was it the concussion that caused it? Yes, but what caused the concussion? She fell down the stairs because she was drinking too much. And then you can see an even higher number are injured every year because of alcohol. And, because our brains continue to develop until we're well into our 20s, the earlier a young person drinks, the more likely they are to become alcohol dependent or experience alcoholism later in life. So I didn't put this up on the slide, but there was a study done several years ago where they took MRI images of 15-year-old brains of 15-year-olds who drank heavily and 15-year-olds who didn't drink at all. And in the young people's brains where there was drinking, it was actually smaller than the 15-year-old brains that didn't drink. So once we lose those brain cells, they don't come back. I mean, the good news is that we know prevention works. I mentioned that our alcohol use rates have fallen, over the decades that we have surveyed our students, and we know that prevention works. We have tools available to us in every community, whether you find them online, whether they're school-based, community-based programs, education and policy, it all works. And all of us have a role in prevention. Even if that's not our official job and we don't work in the field, we all have a role in prevention. So we know it works, but I'm a realist and I've experienced some barriers and challenges myself trying to do prevention work. So what are some of the barriers and challenges that you might have experienced trying to do prevention efforts in your community surrounding teen alcohol use or other drugs? Community belief that it's acceptable. Yes, definitely. Lack of services. It's not happening here. Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Yeah, the social norms is what I talked about earlier. You know, that alcohol is just around and we all accept it and that's it. The message doesn't stick with teens once they're in a new group. That's true. Yep, being legal in other states that they might go to. And a couple of you have said there is no support system. I've heard that my kid would never do that many times from parents. And I often remind parents that even quote unquote good kids make bad choices. And it only takes one decision to drink or use another drug that could lead to a spiral of negative events. And unfortunately, you're right. Especially in our state, in some rural communities, there is not a very strong system of support. There's not services for young people for, intervention, treatment. There are no inpatient treatment beds available for teenagers. So that's unfortunate and hard to convince someone that they need help if there's no one to help them. Physical and mental consequences are unknown. So maybe people don't know about the brain development. They don't know how alcohol can poison our bodies. And I know you've all seen lately the studies that show the link to alcohol and cancer as well. That's been something that's come out over the last couple of years and very strongly in the last year. Accountability and consequences are lacking. Yeah, I don't know if it's true in your community, but in some communities, depending on who the underage drinker is, if it's the star quarterback, if it's the son of, the local minister or whatever the circumstances might be, those students are treated differently when it comes to enforcing the rules than other students might be, which, should never happen, but it does happen, unfortunately. Anything else on these barriers? Has anyone ever heard this one? Well, at least they're not doing drugs. It's just alcohol. Has anyone ever heard that one? Yep. Yep, I hear that one all the time. It's just alcohol. It's not a drug. Well, again, we have to remind people that alcohol is a drug for sure. And it's not one that doesn't have any consequences. Deanna says, what adults do in moderation, many times teens will do in excess. Some parents will assume the innocence of a teen in an activity that's detrimental and dangerous to them. Yep, exactly. And Lisa said, everything goes back to social acceptability. That's true. The social norming of the role that we give alcohol in our community and just in general, what we see on movies and the things we watch and the music we listen to, especially with pop culture, that definitely plays a big role. Okay. So I have a question for you. When teens were asked who is the biggest influence on whether or not they decide to drink, who do you think they said it was? Friends? A couple of you said parents. Okay, for those of you who said parents, you are correct. It is parents. So I don't think we as parents realize the influence we have on our kids, because sometimes, at least in my experience, my boys barely said 2 words to me. You ask them about their day, you get a 1-word answer. So you don't realize how much they're watching us and paying attention to what we do. I started talking to my boys about, tobacco and all of that when they were old enough to understand it. Even when they were toddlers, we would talk about how cigarettes were yucky and made our lungs black. So parents are the biggest influence, and that is good if you're an engaged parent and a good example, but it's not so great if you are a parent who, may have lax attitudes about alcohol, let your kids drink at home, also drink a lot to excess, get drunk in front of your kids. That's just, that is the opposite of what we want to happen. So parents are the big influence. I would have thought it was friends too, but it's parents or caretakers, not just parents if you live with, another caretaker. So here's what I tell parents when I have parents ask, well, what can I do? First thing I say is be a good example. Obviously, teens are watching us and seeing how we handle alcohol. Are we the ones that always come home and have to have a drink after work? Do we have to have alcohol with every meal? Does every party we go to have to have alcohol? I have been amazed over the years of my boys growing up about how many parties, birthday parties for kids, involve alcohol for the adults. I don't know if this is true in your life, in your set of friends, but it really baffles me, why you go to a 1-year-old's birthday and, there needs to be alcohol for parents. Like if you can't be at a kid's birthday party for an hour and a half without alcohol, that might be saying something about us as adults. If you have alcohol in your home, lock it and watch it. I had alcohol in my basement that I had completely forgotten about. And when I saw it, I was like, oh man, I didn't realize this was down here. So lock up your liquor cabinet. I have an alcohol cabinet with wine in it. It's locked up. I don't even know where the key is. My husband has it. I don't know what he did with it. Lock it up. Keep it monitored. Check your vodka bottle. You think, gosh, that looks a little fuller than I remember. Make sure no one's added water to it. Just monitor it. Be a parent. I don't know when some of us as parents allowed other parents to make decisions about whether or not our kids can drink, but if you find out that a parent is providing alcohol or allowing it to be consumed in their home or on their property, that is an issue. No parent should take your role and responsibility as a parent and what you decide is good for your parent and totally change that and allow them to consume alcohol at your home. So, get to know your friends, your kids' friends' parents. I embarrassed my kids when they were younger. They would want to have a sleepover. If I didn't know the parents, I would call them. And what do you think the 2 questions I asked were? Do you have guns and are they locked up? Because my boys were curious about everything. Do you have alcohol and is it locked up? And they would get so embarrassed that I would actually ask those questions. But I am being a responsible parent. And I think we have to make ourselves feel uncomfortable sometimes. Don't wait to talk to your child about alcohol and other drugs when they're teenagers. That's way too late. They're not going to be open to those messages. You need to start when they're old enough to understand age appropriate information. Have rules and enforce them. I have a friend, when her grown children now were teenagers and would come home with friends and they'd all be drinking something, she had a box of straws at the door. She would stick a straw in everyone's drink and take a sip of it to make sure there was no alcohol in any of those beverages. Is that overstepping as a parent? In my opinion, it's not, because in my house, we have rules about alcohol. And if you're coming into my house, you will follow those rules. So make sure you have rules, make sure they're followed, make sure your your kids' friends and their parents know about those rules too. And the 4th one is my favorite. Be a parent, not a friend. I don't know how many times I've had parents say, well, I want to be a friend to my kid. I don't want to check their phone or their computer or their backpack, or, that's just being too invasive. You are not here to be their friend, at least not yet. Hopefully when they leave your house and are adults, then you'll be friends. But my kids knew right from the beginning, I'm your parent. I'm not here to be your friend. You have peers for that. That's our job. You know, we bought cell phones for our boys when they were in middle school because they were involved in sports and all kinds of things. But we reminded them that those are our phones. We pay for them. We can check them anytime we want. Don't be your child's friend. There are a lot of things that schools can do. You can see here, like providing alcohol-free activities like after prom. I don't care what community you live in. One of the number one reasons that teenagers say they drink is because they're bored and there's nothing else to do. You could live in New York City or Chicago, and that's still what young people are saying. So obviously that's not true, but we need to make sure we're providing those alcohol-free activities so our kids can have fun without alcohol. Donna, how much time do I have?
Sorry, if you want to take about 5 more minutes and then we'll take a break and go into our breakout rooms.
Okay. And I always tell young people that they are the biggest messenger for prevention because they are able to reach their peers. I am not. We are not as adults. So I think it's really important for us to encourage those students who have made the choice to be alcohol and other drug free. And even if they're not necessarily the student leaders, I think it's important that we nurture them and give them leadership positions if they want them within our coalitions, and help nurture those students, because sometimes they feel like they can't speak out all the time. And I think we need to let them know that it's okay to be alcohol free and have fun without alcohol. And they can, you know, even if their friends choose not to make that choice, they can at least educate them about the dangers and alcohol poisoning and all the things we talked about. I always say, we always think about how peer influence is negative, but I think it can be positive too, if we allow our young people to work with us and figure out those messages. There are a lot of things that communities can do. I always encourage communities to look at your community event sponsorships. How many of those are alcohol related? Is alcohol always a part? Do you have alcohol at every community event? Where is it? Is it in a separate tent, or is it just everywhere where kids are? I also encourage parents to have safe party contracts with other parents saying, I will not allow any alcohol to be consumed underage in my home. Communities can work with your local retailers to provide training on the laws and checking ID. You can encourage and engage in secret shopper programs, and these are not using minors, these are using 21 and above, but maybe they look young, to see if they're going to be carded. Supporting those alcohol-free events. You can pass ordinances, like we have a social host law, but you can pass a local ordinance that would be civil in nature, that would allow you to offset some of those first responder fees when they have to go to parties. And then having campaigns aimed at parents and other targeted groups. I don't know if you ever heard of roll call presentations, but you can go to law enforcement agencies and ask to give a brief presentation during roll call when they're changing shifts. That's a great way to reach a lot of law enforcement officers at once. You can work with your law enforcement, or here in Indiana, it's our Indiana State Excise Police to do shoulder tapper operations. Basically, remember when I told you young people will pay someone to purchase alcohol for them? That has to do with seeing if that will happen outside of a liquor store. Some communities have implemented anonymous tip lines, so young people and others, you know, feel like they can report parties without their friends finding out. Training, and then get your faith community involved. Youth groups are a great place to share this information, to highlight underage drinking and alcohol awareness during April, maybe with a bulletin insert or whatever. I do this in my own church. So faith communities are a great way to get people involved, because so many of our young people are involved in youth groups, and not only in faith communities, but Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Clubs. These are all great ways to get the community involved. And I'll end with this quote. This is my favorite quote of all when we talk about underage drinking. I've used this quote for 25 years. Holding young people solely responsible for underage drinking is like holding fish responsible for dying in a polluted stream. There is never underage drinking without an adult involved at some point, whether that is an adult who gives it to them, buys it for them, allows them to drink it, isn't checking their ID. There's always an adult involved. And so if we put that responsibility solely on our young people and just tell them, don't do it, don't drink, we are not capturing the whole picture. And we need to remember that there are all kinds of influences that pollute the stream for our young people. You know, ads and products and prices and availability and lack of education and enforcement and all kinds of things. It's not just a minor problem. I always say, it's not just young people. We're all responsible as adults. And here's how you can get in touch with me if you want.
Lisa, thank you so much. Excellent information. You went through so much. And I wish I could be in every breakout session that we're getting ready to do. I imagine the conversation is just going to be amazing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take like a 5-minute break, let everybody do fluid exchanges that need to grab something to drink, use the restroom, grab your lunch. When you come back from your break, we'll see your breakout room invitation on the screen. Please go ahead and join your breakout room. I see in the chat box, someone wants some information on the Porter County Substance Abuse Coalition. I know we've got a couple of coalition members here. If you could stick that in the chat, that would be great. When we come back to the big room after our breakout sessions, I will also make sure I have that information and will provide it to you. So every county in Indiana, I know, is required to have a coalition. So whether you're in Porter County or Lake County, LaPorte, wherever you are here in Indiana, I know that's required. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if that's required in other states or how that works. You know, there's ways you can get in touch. Maybe if Dawn or Emily or someone from the coalition is here, they could address that. Go ahead, take your break, and we will be back in 5 minutes. Ready to do a breakout room. We'll spend 30 minutes in our breakout room, and then we'll come back and do some last minute conversation. Lisa, you can either enjoy a break and have your lunch, or you can join a breakout room if you want to. We leave that totally up to our speakers.
Okay.
We would ask that in half an hour you be back in case there's some questions that come up in the breakout rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and set up the breakout rooms. You guys go ahead and take a quick break. So hopefully most of you had great conversations. I understand from one of our rooms that it was very quiet. I did not give the best send off on what the point of the breakout rooms were. I'm sorry for that. But hopefully many of you had some great conversations. And I think what I'd like to do now is just open it up. If anybody at all has questions for Lisa, we'll do a short Q&A. And then I would like to know from those of you who are still on the call, I see our numbers have dropped, which is pretty common for the second half, but what takeaways do you have? How might you personally or as an organization contribute to the discussion of prevention of underage drinking? I also wanted to real quickly, before we forget, let those of you in Northwest Indiana know that the Porter County Substance Abuse Council meets the second Thursday of every month at 8 o'clock in the morning And currently we are meeting at the Porter County Community Foundation. So that's kind of the details of where we are locally meeting. And like I said, I know in Indiana, every county has a coalition that's meeting. And I'm sure that there are others in other states and areas that have similar projects happening. So, okay, unmute yourself, ask your questions, make your comments. Please share. Lisa's here and available to have a conversation with us. I see Jill has started the conversation in the chat, just saying that prevention is key. And this seminar has reminded her to do her part. So Jill, thank you. I hope to see you at the coalition meeting next month. You would be more than welcome.
One thing that we talked about in our breakout room that I'm definitely going to be more aware of is that there's different ways that they're inventing, or they're different inventions of ways that you can consume alcohol that I was not aware of. So there's something called powdered alcohol, which thankfully is not legalized in the state of Indiana, but that doesn't mean that it can't exist in Indiana. Someone could still bring it here illegally. So to be aware of that. And then also that some people are vaping alcohol, which is something I wasn't aware of. So I know in the schools that we serve, vaping is prevalent, and never once did I think maybe there could be alcohol in there, but now I'm more aware of that. And that's a conversation that I can have with the students.
It's also something that we can, as an organization, share with teachers, because teachers are not always aware either of the latest trends that are going on. You know, it's, as we know, as a youth serving organization, trends change. I mean, what teens are doing today is not the same thing they were doing 6 months from now, and it will not be the same thing they're doing 6 months from now. So, you know, it's good that we keep up on these things. That's one of the reasons we do these monthly webinars, is to just help us stay engaged and stay connected with what's going on out there.
I was telling them in the group I was in that, you know, and someone in our group Googled it, but it's one of the products is called a vape teeny, and you can order it on Amazon, and it heats up your alcohol and you can vape it. So yeah, things that you never would think would exist or would need to exist.
Yeah, and one of the things I put in the chat earlier, I was on a field trip with a group of high school band students, and one of the girls got totally smashed. And what we found out was that a lot of the kids had brought vodka in water bottles in their coolers, because they were allowed to bring water bottles. So now what we do is we make sure that all bottles are sealed when they come on the bus. If they have water bottles, we have to approve them. You know, I mean, they find ways. They find ways. So we have to be smarter than they are.
Or get those straws out and start taking a sip of everybody's drink before they.
So then you'd be wasted before you get to the band concert.
Probably true.
You got to rinse and spit or something. I don't know.
I was watching a show. I love Chicago shows. I was watching Chicago Men. I know it's shows, but it just got me thinking. It was about a woman, a girl who shows up to the hospital and she's pretty much wasted. And they're like, how? They found out she was putting in her pad so it could get in faster.
Yep.
Like, what? Oh my
You know,
God.
they soak tampons in vodka.
Mhm.
Who would
Well,
ever
there-
think?
No, and there are all kinds of things like flasks that you can stick in your bra or in, you know, whatever. And, you know, I was talking earlier about the vaping products. Some of them look like phone cases. You would never know that's what it was, because it's on a phone, and you would think it's just a phone case, but it's not. So yeah, a lot of like I said in my group, if these inventors of these products could put their brain power to good use, we would cure the common cold and all kinds of other stuff. You know, they need to use their their skills for something positive.
I know, right? So Raquel, I see your comment that you forgot about it being Alcohol Awareness Month. It's, it's hard to keep up with everything. What month is what month? It's also Youth Violence Prevention Month. So we've got some stuff going on for that. Next month is Mental Health Awareness Month, but it's also Teen Pregnancy Prevention Month. And so our guest speaker next month is Dr. Diane Foley, who's going to be talking about optimal health for adolescents, and in particular, how optimal health is a prevention method for teen pregnancy prevention. So should be a really great conversation, but you still have a few days left. And even if you run into May, who cares? It's an important conversation with proms coming up and graduations and weddings. Alcohol is going to be free flowing all over the place for the next 3 or 4 months. So
Yep.
any reminders we can give these kids, any support, any encouragement is so important.
And like we mentioned earlier, often alcohol and other substance use is tied to mental health. So it's a perfect fit for Mental Health Month as well.
Yeah, for sure. Unhealthy coping skills, right? So what other takeaways did you all have that you'd like to share, or questions that you might have for Lisa?
I thought it was really cool, about the brain not being till fully developed until 27, because we literally just taught a lesson on that and it was 25. And so it was really cool to get that updated information. And it was really interesting that it got older. So
Yeah, isn't it though?
Yeah.
And this is very recent research too. So I'm not surprised that whatever you were teaching wasn't updated yet, but yeah, it's definitely not, I have a son who's almost 21, and when he turned 18, he's like, I'm an adult now. I said, are you though? We still pay all your bills and, everything. And just because legally you're an adult, that doesn't really mean your brain's not even fully developed. You're not an adult.
yeah.
You're almost an adult, but you're not quite there.
They get to practice some aspects of adulting. That's what they get to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, Lisa, can you provide maybe where that research was or who did that research? Because I wasn't familiar. I teach on the adolescent brain pretty regularly, and I hadn't seen that update. So if you could share with us where that came from, that would be great. Anything else from anybody? All right, well, we will be sending out the recording for this webinar. I encourage you to get it in front of people. You'll have the link, it's shareable. If you have organizations and you can put it on your website, please feel free to do so. This information really is for you. It's a service from our organization to you as other organizations, as parents, as frontline staff. We want to be supportive of the work that you're doing and the care that you're giving young people. So please share it, share it, share it. It would be even a great, turn it into a little mini presentation for parents at a PTO meeting or something like that. Or for a church function, it would be great for a youth group. It would be some great conversation starters for sure. So wherever you are working, hopefully you have found this helpful personally. And like I said, please share, share, share. Lisa, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. It was an excellent presentation, great information. To the Porter County Substance Abuse Council, thank you for co-hosting our event today and for being here. Oh, yeah, I'm looking. Evelyn's commenting on the 420 marijuana day and how society promotes that. It was all over social media. It was all over the news, but I haven't seen anything about underage drinking or, alcohol. It's just sad. It's sad that even in the it's just sad. On our soapboxes, that's why we're in the work that we're doing, right? Because we care and we want to make a difference. So, yeah. So our friend from over the waters, I could tell by her accent, is reminding us to be careful what we invest in, where we're putting our dollars. You know, they are definitely advertising to young people, as Lisa pointed out with the beverages that she showed us pictures of. We just have to be careful. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Lisa. Again, wonderful presentation. We will have you back for sure.
Thank you.
I'll have a wonderful day.